Here we go, team. We are live and we are joined in, and people are starting to come in the room. We see Paige Swanson and Alan and Bethany, Joseph Meyer, Vadim Schur. So excited to see you all coming in the room. We're glad you're here, starting the new year off with us. And I would love to hear where you are coming from. Where are you joining us? Jan Vondenkamp, where are you joining us from?
That's my mom.
Colin Comstock. Yes, Jeff's mom's here. Hi, Jeff's mom, Jan. We're so glad you're here. Craig, Ellie, Jordan Fisk. Hit us in the chat window. We see Vadim saying, "Hey, here from Toronto, Canada." So we got two countries currently represented. We're here with, well, you guys are letting us know where you're coming from, like Colin from Philly. We have a bunch of northern folk here starting the new year off. We have Jeff and Jen and Justin, the three J's, all in Minnesota, and it is currently single digits where I am. Twin Cities folks, how is it down there? Can we be proud cold Minnesotans for a quick sec while everybody's coming in?
Sure can.
Absolutely.
What was it this morning? Under 10 degrees for sure. I haven't even been outside yet, to be honest.
It's a little,
I'm just happy the sun's out.
A little warm for January, I think.
We need a little more snow. We got Paige joining from Boston, Jordan from Minneapolis, Craig from Brooklyn. We got some good representation, team. Lots of states, lots of areas represented. We're so glad you guys are here. We see a few more folks joining us. Just so everybody knows, I am saying your name aloud, but don't worry. Peyton Stasiak, Parker Jones, Ryan's AI note taker, Sam Blackburn, Sarah Grasmon. We can't see you, you can just see us. So if you have your jammies on still and your sweats, because it's still not quite the full new year, go back in yet. If you have a kid or a dog in the background, no worries. But we are so excited you're here and so excited we're kicking the new year off with us. Please feel free, if you haven't yet, let us know where you're coming from in the chat window. And by way of introduction, I just want to invite you to our big interactive space today. So this is around the coffee table and very interactive. So you're going to hear some tremendous work from Jeff and Jen around this broader topic as we kind of dive into dry January right now and thinking about alcohol-free spaces. And this is not the room to sort of sit back and relax and just listen. We want to hear your questions. We're not going to save a bunch of time for Q&A at the end. We're actually going to answer them as we go. The best place to do that is with the Q&A feature, if you can see that button there, or in the chat. Ideally, we're going to go over to the Q&A, and we're going to send you a little poll along the way, maybe a couple points, and some resources over in the chat window. So we hope you leave here energized, inspired, and full of like good resources and links to read more and to learn more afterwards. And one of the things we're going to do right away, and Linz is in the background, he's probably going to hit that poll button for us in 1 minute. So before we get there, we just want to know who's in the room with us. So as you're seeing that in front of you, click the button here. Here's our kind of main poll, and we want to know who you are. Are you somebody who is interested in the business of sauna as an enthusiast? You're just here joining for this, and you're like, man, I love jumping in cold water. I love thinking about sort of alcohol-free spaces with folks. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're just here as an enthusiast. Perhaps you're here as somebody who's thinking about starting a sauna business. You're looking through the doors of this, and you're like, wait a minute. I want to learn from this craft brewer about how to get into the wellness space. Jeff is your guy. Jeff is absolutely your guy who's innovating in that. Or perhaps you are currently running a business around hot and cold therapies in some sort of way or look. We're happy you're here as well. We do these monthly, and we dive in because we want to make sure we are inspiring and resourcing the community around this nationwide and honestly worldwide. We have folks all over the world who join for these calls. While you guys are clicking those buttons, I'm going to come over and give some good introductions to some proper introductions to Jeff and Jen. So glad you guys are here. Jen, What a joy to get to be with you today. If you guys don't know Jen, you need to go watch her TED Talk. So you're going to get probably some snippets and some bullet points from it today. But Jen is one of the leaders really in my life around kind of thinking about social spaces and how do we decenter alcohol from being the only way that humans connect socially. And you're going to hear a lot from Jen's story. And you're going to hear a lot of the ways that Jen's doing that. Jen, you have like the most titles of anybody I know, because whenever I see you, there's like some new organization that you are birthing into the world and developing. It's a joy to have you here with us. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to talk and kind of go deep with all this stuff.
Yeah, awesome. What a great intro. Thank you, Justin. I'm excited to be here as well and make some fun announcements at the end.
Great. I'm just a good hype man, Jen. You know, I love the good people in my life getting their credit. And we have Jeff with us as well. You guys, I'm going to give Jeff a really big title, and he's just going to have to receive it. I think Jeff is one of the most innovative craft brewers in North America right now. He's maybe going to sort of not receive that, but I think he's a guy who's thinking more about what craft breweries should and could be in the future than your average guy who likes to sip a cold one. So Jeff, thanks for being you, and thanks for being here. And we've worked together on a whole bunch of things over the years, whether it's jumping in cold water together, creating beverages together around this. It's an honor to have you and have you speak to what's going on in all of these things. So it's great to have you here. Thanks for being here, Jeff.
Yeah, of course. I'm surprised we haven't done this yet, and very excited to be here. So
you guys, you're here with the best, and like I said, ask all the questions. Stuart is already sort of dropping some knowledge in there, saying, "Hey, I'm a Wim Hof coach based in Scotland, and I want to get people in the sauna and add it to my workshops." Oh my gosh, I love it, Stuart. We're so glad you're here. And Lindsay's been already dropping you a whole bunch of links and everything. I'm going to ask Linz, could you just show our poll so we can see who's in the room? We have a really great spread today. We have a bunch of enthusiasts, maybe almost 20% of us just loving sauna and cold plunge and NA spaces. We have a bunch of folks, almost half of us, who are thinking about starting a sauna business. So glad you're here. Also, that's really hard and lonely. So thanks for being here, because then you're not alone. And hopefully there's some things to solve along the way. Our team loves getting to resource people around that. And about a third of us in the room are already running that in some sort of way. And so we are just cheering you on and so glad for your work there. Okay, guys, that's the big intro. Here we are. We're diving in. And Jen, I want to kind of start with you. I want to lean in on this, the big title of what we're kind of diving into today. And that is this reimagining of social spaces. What does that look like in the future? And I really want to sort of start with your journey, right? Because you have kind of a history of this. And we're going to unpack today sort of some of these bigger words of sobriety and recovery. But there's sort of, this isn't only a conversation about that. But Jen, would you start us there and just talk about a little bit of your story about coming into wellness spaces and starting to think, wait a minute, how could this look different?
Yeah. I love the topic and so excited to dive into this. So I'll start just by saying I have 10 years of continuous sobriety. My sobriety date was July 28th of 2014. I just celebrated my 11th New Year's Eve completely sober. And it's amazing. It's amazing to to discover that there is a celebrated sober life. So my work has really been in that space. But when I started trying to get sober over 12 years ago, there weren't spaces for me to feel like I could belong in. So I talk a lot about that first year of trying not to drink, but going into these spaces, bars and restaurants, and even wellness events that were paired with alcohol, and just wondering, like, how am I going to do this life? How am I going to be in community with people without a drink in my hand? And at the time, 12 years ago, there was O'Doul's and maybe free wine and just like a couple options. And I just felt like it was really limiting. And I had worked really hard to maintain my sobriety and start that journey, but felt there were no social spaces that truly supported that choice I was making. And at the heart of my TED Talk is really the question of, why aren't you drinking? Almost like you don't belong, you don't fit in, and you are not part of this community. And so I channel all of that, and we can talk about how that progressed over years. It certainly wasn't an overnight thing where I shared my sober journey, but once I started doing that about 7 years ago, I realized that there was a real need to address our social spaces, and that just wasn't being done. So as a result of that, I ended up creating a couple different communities, and we can talk about those as well. So Zero Proof Collective, and then Sauna and Sobriety.
I would love to. We're going to dive into sauna a lot. Talk a little bit about this sort of advocacy work, a little bit of that Zero Proof Collective, because I love that you've really sort of set the table to say, hey, we actually need to re-envision like what options are also in front of people so they don't feel awkward and weird. And so
Right.
that maybe crazy idea, maybe they like the beverages that they're sipping on,
Yeah.
right? They don't have to
Wild.
have the thing that is like, I don't really like this in
Yeah.
this space, but I have to have the thing, and I feel like a second-class citizen here.
Right.
Talk a little bit about Zero Proof Collected and kind of the work you've done there to do that.
Yeah, well, I think an aha moment was 3 some years ago when I had typically been having the experience of going into bars and restaurants where I was the only person ordering anything non-alcoholic. And I went to an event that was like almost like a speakeasy, DJ nightclub vibe that was all non-alcoholic. And that experience of belonging and being in community with people that were completely sober showed me that there was a lot of room to re-envision spaces. What I also realized was that the recovery community typically tells people in recovery to not touch anything that resembles alcohol. And so that community wasn't even demanding these non-alcoholic beverages. So there was this interesting space in the middle. And I would say over the last 3 years with Dry January and just more people becoming mindful drinkers, that there's this middle ground of people who can choose or want to choose not to drink, but not because they're what I call sober necessary or an alcoholic. So the misconception was all these people in recovery would be, coming into these spaces demanding an elevated non-alcoholic beverage. It really is this middle ground of more people just saying, I want to enjoy my life. I want to be productive. And I want really elevated options. And Zero Proof Collective started with the basis of that and coming together as a community to address where the barriers are in the industry. And there are a lot. There are a lot of barriers. There are, a distribution system that doesn't allow non-alcoholic products to come in. The systems in the US just aren't set to necessarily get those NA beverages into people's hands. But that's changing. So that's the work of Zero Proof Collective and hosting events that are showcasing what an elevated non-alcoholic beverage looks like. We just don't even know what that is. A lot of them currently are very sugar forward and high calories. So we're looking to really set a bar for this amazing beverage that you can have in your hand, which is a key thing in a social setting. And really, like you said, Justin, really just enjoy the flavor profile and have a different experience.
Now, for those who are listening in, I just want to highlight what you said there, Jen, of this, like, there is two paths here, and there are some folks that it is sort of necessary in their life to be in recovery, to be sort of moving away from more addiction around this and using that substance. And I think the interesting thing and maybe the more impactful thing, even as somebody who I have a lot of alcoholism in my family, I've seen that very, very firsthand. And so that work is important to me. And I think I'm seeing more of the folks who are just saying, you know what, I'm actually trying to drink less in my life. I tend to feel a little bit better if I don't drink as much. And maybe I go and have one drink instead of 3 drinks if I'm out. Are you seeing kind of a rise in both of those areas, or is there any sort of data or conversation that you're sort of looking at around, kind of both of those trajectories for folks, Jen? What's the details? What's the numbers? What's the broader scope outside of just your work and advocacy around it?
Yeah, I would say what we call, the middle. So people that are choosing to maybe go out and have a couple alcoholic beverages and then switch to NA is actually pretty much the norm. And we see numbers and trends in, let's say, liquor stores where in a person's cart, you will see the majority of people that are, purchasing alcoholic beverages are the ones that are also purchasing NA beverages. So it's not necessarily people in sobriety or long-term sobriety that are going into different spaces and just purchasing NA. So it's this combination. And I think the integration of that and those choices are also opening it up for community experiences that involve, not the othering of people in like AA or recovery groups, which is what my experience was. It was like, if I'm going to be in community and not drink, I have to be with these other people who fully, like, no one's drinking. But to me, that integrated experience is more open now. Like, I can be around people that choose or can drink and then switch to NA. So it's this middle ground. And I think that's what's really driving the change right now is more people just choosing not to drink for whatever reason.
So you guys feel free, click your Q&A button and drop some questions in here for Jen around this kind of broader topic too, whether it's, amount of drinks, whether it's kind of leading into the recovery side of things. And I wanna also hear from you a little bit here, Jeff. Because there's like good news and bad news in here for you. You're the alcohol as industry guy. You're in the brewing business. And so some of what Jen's saying could sound bad for business. And yet at the same time, I see you as somebody who is kind of pushing the needle here and saying it's actually okay that we are consuming less of this because it's good for us as humans. What are your Jeff's sort of kind of initial takes? And I know we have a lot to dive into here, but give us a sense on your end from that side of things, from doing breweries, from selling product now that is both NA and non. What's your take on kind of Jen's work and how that's been dovetailing with your work?
Yeah, I mean, I've known Jen now for almost a year, and we've actually only hung out in a sauna, I think. So we've had these discussions openly, and I think, since I started brewing beer, my intent getting into it was a purely creative process and also a very communal process. So, home brewing with your buddies on a Saturday, like that essentially is what started my passion for wanting to start a craft brewery. But I've also had a very personal conviction to try to stay really healthy in this space, and that's been challenging because a lot of aspects of the industry are, cheap alcohol, mass consumption. Especially in America, a lot of the consumption habits are happening in isolation. There's just a lot of really unhealthy sides of our business that I've been trying to sort of combat. And I think a lot of small breweries who are more community oriented are really, they're going to be the ones driving innovation, I think, in this space, because again, they're serving their community. So, what was, the tap rooms are now becoming sort of the central hub, right? So the more, we want to be inclusive, we want to welcome different kinds of people. We don't want people to feel like, ooh, I feel a little bit off put here. I'm not going to spend my time there, right? We're trying to design the right business where people can come in commune. So, my intent in the industry has never been, let's drive as much volume and as much alcohol into the business as possible. It's been, what can be the most sort of creative, thought-provoking beverages we can produce while still setting some healthy boundaries. And, even in our taproom experience, right? Overconsumption, any issues related to that have been almost a zero value for us. So I think, alcohol businesses can set some healthy standards, but looking into the future and, future generations, future consumers, everyone is asking for more health conscious beverages. And we want to be diverse as much as possible. So that's sort of generally where I think we'll be headed, is that creative process around craft brewing will just start to look a little bit differently. And even one last topic, but even, even in the beers that we initially started producing, like our average alcohol by volume, for example, has gradually been coming down, right? We're looking, we're not just trying to pack as much booze into our packages as we can. There's a lot more that goes into it. So yes, it's good and bad, but again, we need to innovate for our spaces and our community. So that's at least my take on it.
I love that, Jeff. And I think this like leaning in as the brewery as the social space primarily, that might be lubricated to some people with alcohol, but to Jen's point, that doesn't have to be the norm is really an interesting concept. Jen, I want to go next to this idea around sauna. And I want to go there because for you, it also has been this unique sort of interruptive space to some of especially in the recovery circles of what's normal. Would you sort of tell the story and tell the folks around like how you discovered sauna also? Because we gotta tie these conversations together. And there are people asking in the chat window right now, like, wait a minute, how does the sauna piece tie in? Jen, how did that start for you?
Yeah, well, I'll just start by saying I think, sauna and cold exposure is typically been attractive to people for like this physical experience. Like, how can I, be in nature? There's a lot of different ways people come to it. But when I was experiencing not belonging in community, I came to sauna with the idea that maybe my mental health could improve. And so there's this really strong connection, I believe, between the sober space and mental health that we're just starting to see research and data on. And so what's happening is that people are going to the sauna space and using kind of the metaphor for challenging and pushing our body physically to these limits and being uncomfortable, right? And then also pairing that with what happens when you're in sobriety and trying to rewire your brain when you feel uncomfortable to not make that decision immediately to drink. So there's this correlation there. And Scott Carney talks about it in his book, The Wedge. And I've written about the resilience that sauna and the physicality of that helped me correlate that to my mental health and sobriety journey. So I felt when I co-founded Sauna and Sobriety with Natalie Lang, the idea was to specifically invite people struggling with sobriety or just trying to not drink in a social setting to invite that in and say, sauna is actually a really great tool for modeling this. And it has all other benefits and other ways to enter in. And what I loved about it was that I didn't have to plan a big social outing to go and do this. I could go on my own to these guided experiences, and whomever was there was, people I could be in community with or not. But I got such a rush of like endorphins and dopamine and like community at those events that I feel like it really ties to this idea of sustained sobriety. Because again, in my early sober days, I didn't know how I was going to do that. I just didn't have the spaces. So sauna literally has opened up that for me, and I wanted to share that with others, thus created that community.
And for those who are sort of peering through the window here to your work, Jen, you are often working kind of connected to other spaces of public bathing or public sauna or public cold plunge, where you are somebody who comes in, curates a session now.
Yeah.
After this journey of like, wait, my mind just got blown, and you're a networker and you're a gatherer of humans, and you're like, I need more people to be here. And so now a lot of that work looks like kind of coming in and programming in addition to that space. Is that right? To just kind of put a more fine point on kind of what the work looks like from discovering sauna as this naturally social space to also now today guiding sessions and kind of guiding events there. Is that right?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I love how you phrased all of that. So with Sauna and Sobriety, we started in May of 2023 and have had 14 events. And what we do is we have a programmed like 4-hour complete experience that we essentially have kind of trademarked, and that's our own, which means we don't have any specific sauna venue or location we're always at, and we can bring that experience to different sauna venues and different communities. And that's exciting. So what that whole experience is to us is bringing people together in a community circle and having people, you know, kind of drop in where, you know, what brought them there. We do this kind of community circle process. And then people are flowing between sauna, cold immersion, and also we bring really great food. And then the NA bar is the highlight of it. So in my experiences with all events tied to wellness, there might be alcohol and non-alcoholic products there, but we are completely a sober event. So that in and of itself and that experience is something very unique to what we deliver. And we've actually had people in early sobriety kind of react to some of that and just like look around and be like, how is this possible? Like what people know and what people think of like an alcoholic and what that lifestyle might look like is totally flipped when we can be, you know, in these spaces and be celebratory without any alcohol whatsoever. So it's almost like modeling and proving this out. And what we wanted to also say was take that one experience and have the confidence to go out in the world and maybe choose NA at different events and continue your sobriety. Like we wanted to be able to say it's possible and this is how we would model it. So those events have been just very rewarding when people come to it saying, I've never had an experience like this. I've been in the rooms of AA for 10 years and no one has ever said, you can be, you know, out and about in these social communities, have fun and celebrate the life that we've worked so hard to create without alcohol.
I think it's really tremendously sort of creative work when you can fuse different things together, Jen. And that keeps coming out when I hear you talk about this. It's like, I want to actually make a new type of space. And that's going to involve some guidance, some support, but also some creativity. And yeah, let's like invite people to heat up and get sweaty and jump in the cold plunge. And I do love right now that you're sort of like this, you know, freelancer who's able to create a lot of different community spaces. I think some of the folks on the call today are probably thinking about starting their own business and wondering how they are going to integrate this in. You know, Julia's asking a question in the chat right now. Do people attend for the full 4 hours or do you host a number of groups over that period? So like, it's in a very functional way is like, how does it happen? How does it flow? How do you do the thing? And I would imagine there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but do you have any sense on that? Like if you're going to host an event for an amount of time, are people there for a little bit or a lot of it, Jen? And how does that work? How do you manage the flow of people? Do you cap it at a certain number? Give us a little bit of a overview of that.
Yeah, so a lot of the max capacity depends on the venue itself, but typically, you know, some events we've sold out at 65 people. One of our favorite venues is Embrace North, and that's my main sauna community that I regularly go to, and they have a space that allows for about 65. So with 3 saunas in that location, people are sort of organically just rotating between sauna, cold exposure, and then we typically have 2 guided programs throughout the evening that are 25 minutes long. So we publish that in advance. So let's say the event is from 5 to 9. At 5:30, we have our first 25-minute yoga, like dance movement thing. People can pop into that. And then you have other people arriving a little bit later. There's food and beverage and conversation. Sometimes we have a DJ, all of this going on in a community circle. And then within like another hour and a half, we have our second like yoga or movement flow. So we have a couple structured things happening, and then we just let the rest be really organic. And that's just been our mantra. Natalie and I from the beginning have just been like, we really want the guests and the attendees to sort of create their own experience. And then another thing we do is we don't charge for anything at the event. So you buy your ticket. We have an accessible fee, which we think is $40, you know, per event for 4 hours is almost unheard of in the Twin Cities for what we provide. But that means that you can come and just not have to worry about, you know, paying additional fees for drinks and food. It's all included. Inclusivity feels really good. And that helps a lot with the flow of the event.
I think just so people are sort of hearing that, I hear a lot of freedom in that. I hear a lot of creativity and enough structure to make the thing work. And why I bring this up is because we have business owners on the call, business owners listening in, people wanting to start businesses. And my experience around sauna related business owners is most of them, they do have a heart and they're not in this get rich quick scheme. They're actually trying to impact their community. They're trying to get people healthy. They're trying to introduce people to this. And one of the questions we have right now in the chat is, what is the reimagining of social space? How is it linked to sauna? And how can this be advertised or sold so it feels accessible to everyone? I think you hit a number of the answers already in there, Jen, of this type of programming, in that it's sort of like permissioning people to be in a space
Yes.
that is alcohol free. And then it's also, hey, just in terms of cost, you guys are you a 501c3? Are you a nonprofit org officially?
We're a for-profit seeking sponsorship from other recovery communities and groups for funding.
Yep.
Be able to keep that accessible. Yep.
So as the sauna business, like Embrace North, that those guys are out of Minneapolis, they're worth checking out. I mean, you're sort of renting the space for that block of time, right? You're a corporate buyout. You're coming in to host in that space. And I think for people who are kind of hearing that, like these are ways to be thinking about, how do we program our space, or is alcohol involved in our space? And I kind of want to go there for a little bit. And Jen, you brought this up as we were starting to kind of dive into these topics, is some people see sauna in a social way. Some people see sauna in a wellness, recovery, and sort of challenge way. And some people see sauna under this kind of broader frame of detox. Sauna gets linked to that word of detox a lot, which could also be, I had too many drinks last night and I need to sweat it out. That is a thing that humans think about when they do this, whether the science tells us that's true or not. Jen, what's some of your take on this? I'll give some of my take on it too, but what's been your sort of like recovery and social experience as it relates to this broader idea of sauna and detox, like coming into a space like that?
Yeah. Well, I think it just opens up the discussion about American culture and where some of the traditions in Europe and Finnish culture come from, which are very different. And Americans, like, I had this view. I've worked out my entire life. I've been an avid, exercise workout. And I used to say toxins in, toxins out. I am that person that, would come to an experience like this. I, used to do that. I get on my exercise bike and just be like, let's get a reset. And I still hear many conversations in the sauna about that, especially on, after heavy drinking holidays, and people do come to it with that kind of idea that you can reset. So I think in America, that work hard, play hard mentality still rings very true. Yeah. Does that answer your question? I think there's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I think some people do think of it that way. I think a lot of the scientific data starts to sort of like muddle that idea a little bit. I don't think it's as easy as you sweat it out, even though your skin is your largest detoxification organ, and your liver works better when you're in the sauna. You sort of ramp all those things up, and you are metabolizing things more. I also want to often talk to people about how alcohol speeds up in your system when you're in the sauna. And so we actually need to be really careful of that. And so broadly, as we think about these type of businesses and these social spaces, I tend to see alcohol being used after, if at all, right? And so they aren't sort of leaning in with, hey, here's your wine pairing inside the sauna, or here's the beer in the sauna. Though I do know that people, especially in private settings, Jeff, you have a really beautiful sauna at your cabin in the backyard. You're also a brewer. You've maybe had a beer around the sauna, maybe in the sauna, or for sure after the sauna. And so I think those things for folks, like, I want to make sure people are hearing that we want to be sort of mindful of these rituals, but also we want to be thinking like what is good for humans now and today, and not kind of make it sound evil in either direction, right? To be all sober or not. Jeff, do you have sort of a take on that as somebody who sort of like sees also some of the benefit of these things and, you know, have done sauna your whole life and really have woven this into a lot of your home practice and personal practice? How do you think about fitting alcohol in a responsible way?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was introduced to sauna because of that post party, like actually in South Korea, for an entire week. That was the ritual. It was the next morning, you know, you're in Seoul and you go to the bathhouse. But if I didn't experience that way, I would never have like found all of the other benefits. So like that was my progression, was just like, I'm doing this because I'm detoxing, but wow, I have this whole different perspective when I leave this bathhouse. That's interesting. I want to keep coming back to that. So actually, since I built our sauna up at our cabin, I've only had a beer one time in there, and it was like, it was a, you know, a big gathering of my cousin, you know, it was, but generally that's off limits, like because it just makes you feel bad. Like it's not, and the idea of like a hot liquid, it just, beer needs to be cold and it doesn't go well in sauna. But no, I think it's hard, right? Like alcohol is interwoven into our society in ways that will likely never change just because it's been around for so long. But I think it's bringing awareness to the effects. Good or bad, and figuring out how to, you know, build that into your life so it's not detracting from it. It's finding a way to have balance, right? There's probably 20 things we're consuming on a weekly basis that aren't great for our health, but if we find a way to learn as much about it as we can and build a healthy routine around those things, you can live a healthy and well life. So that's always been my perspective, is just like, you know, we need to find balance, and also, you know, celebrate these crafts. Like sauna is a craft, beer is a craft. These are creative outlets for people. They create job. There's a lot of good things that come from it, but it's just, again, it's sort of laying it out and figuring out what's this progression sort of need to look like.
So helpful. I'm going to come over to a couple of the questions coming in
Yeah.
because we got some good ones being asked here. One of which, Jen, is we need your recipe list. We need your NA drink list. So simply, where do people go to find that, Jen, if they do want to get a few resources from you or a few recommendations? That's question one. You can probably send that link in the chat at some point here.
I will do that.
Any off the top of your head?
So I will just start by saying my business partner in Zero Proof Collective, Kate Faulkner, is an excellent mixologist, and I am going to add this in the chat for everyone. Actually, I may just send this to you, Lindsay, and you can share. We have a recipes tab on zeroproofcollective.com, and that has some of our favorites. But one of the things that I've loved to be able to do, and this is how Jeff and I connected, is I don't have a product of my own. So a lot of times I am creating menus based on relationships with different makers in the NA space. And a lot of them are what we call RTD, ready to drink, that any sauna business can have on site. Like, for example, Embrace North has Fresh Steeps tea. Shout out Vince. But like, those things are really accessible to anyone who owns a sauna business. And you can have these ready to drink options that, I mean, it's just amazing how much the categories have expanded. And then for each sauna and sobriety event, for example, I have curated a menu of 4 to 5 different NA drinks. So some of them will be an NA cocktail. That's, you know, something easy we mix on site. Sauna water's always been there since the beginning. Open up a can of sauna water, you know, super easy to serve. And then sometimes we do an NA beer and a whole variety of products. So you can check out some of the menus that I've had. If you go to my Jen Varale Instagram account, I'm always posting, what am I serving at events? What products do I like? If that's what people are looking for.
Super helpful. Ryan says, Jen, I love your brand. Have you had any ideas or talked with anybody about creating a sober sauna sports bar concept? I think this is a fun like mashup of concepts.
Yep.
And then he says, hey, a brewery is my favorite place to hang out because the atmosphere, watching sports with friends. I don't always want to drink, but I always want the dopamine buzz. And trying to imagine what this space might look like in NYC or Connecticut. And he says, would love to hear your thoughts if this has been discussed. I'd also love, Jeff, for you to chime in here because I know you have some of those things in your head. And we're going to talk about your brewery in a moment. But Jen, any thoughts on going beyond event programming and opening up a space? Are you envisioning sort of some of those next brick and mortar conversations?
Yes, I read Ryan's comments. That's great. Yes, I will just quickly say Zero Proof Collective, that's our intent, is to bring industry leaders together. So anytime something's happening in the Twin City space, I usually hear about it. So there's ideas. There is a sober club here just for sports, and it's geared toward women. It's like based on a league of their own. I forget the exact name, but that's what Zero Proof Collective is doing. We're talking about creating a nightclub. Like all these ideas come to us, and that is something that is definitely in the works. And Ryan, I'd love to connect with you and give you some more ideas, but I would too love to hear from Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, we're really, what does your community need from you, right? So it kind of depends. Like I'm not an avid sports bar goer, so I don't have a lot of like insight on that industry. But again, it's inclusivity. Like you really have to put that at the forefront of your business planning. There's a lot of different kinds of people, and especially in a people who are looking to watch a sporting event live. I personally think when I go into a lot of those establishments, especially in Minnesota, they're not super inclusive. They feel very, very designed for like a specific type of person, and I don't always feel super welcome or super welcome there. But that's more because I'm not into sports. But I think like that's the biggest thing that I've learned is just trying to, again, use empathy in your business planning phase to sort of enable as many types of different people to come into that space and feel comfortable. That's where I would probably start.
Can I just add that
Jeff,
I was just going to
Go
add that
ahead,
you
Jen.
touched on the word inclusivity. And I think that is the biggest thing that we are always talking about in any social space we want to create, and looking at, how does that exist? Does it need to, how can you shape a social space based on that idea and the offerings and the culture that goes with that? So not just, placing non-alcoholic options on the menu, but truly having everyone in the venue, the people that are serving everything, understand what that actually means.
Yeah.
Jeff, I want to come back to you on this, and part of it, there's some questions here that are all sort of pointing in a similar direction. We have one that's basically saying, what suggestions do you have to make sauna as successful as cafe culture? One of the questions is, how are you, what are you kind of seeing for the macro analysis of the NA market, what it's projected to look like in the future? I'd love to kind of start there, Jeff. Give us this like zoomed out view of also what alcohol is doing as an industry. And then I want to talk a little bit about this fun NA beverage that we developed together to kind of fit this niche. So what's happening in breweries right now, Jeff? Tell us a little bit, and what can we expect in the future?
Yeah, I mean, again, the pandemic really has kicked this off in a big way. Some of the data I was researching showed like isolated heavy drinking was happening like 20% higher than normal. So that's really kicked off this wave of like, okay, we don't want to feel like that anymore. Like we don't want to isolate in our home and just drink a 4-pack of beer by ourselves, right? Like I think that's where a lot of this is stemming for some of the older generations who are really used to having a beer in their hand. But I really think it's changing a lot, and some of the leaders I would say in the industry are like everyone always comes back to athletic. That's the gold standard for NA beer production. They're the 10th largest brewery in the country right now, which they've grown at a rate that isn't even calculable in a lot of ways since 2017. They are a massive organization now. I want to say they make up almost a quarter of all NA production now in the United States. So obviously, markets are growing for this. They position themselves well. There's also local innovations in Minnesota, actually, that ABV technology is one of them, which we can link. But essentially, they will take a brewery's finished alcoholic beer product and take the alcohol completely out of the beverage. So you can make your whatever creative product that you would like, and you can just take it to them and they will remove the alcohol and send you back with an NA option that's still full of the complexity and the flavor. That technology has not been around for more than a few years in an at-scale way. So I think there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of consumer demand, and there's a lot of production now that's being transitioned from alcohol to non-alcoholic. I think the thing that I'm most concerned about is that, similar to other, alcoholic beverages, THC, seltzer, what have you, a lot of people are just jumping on the bandwagon without having like a mission or a reason around why, which is inevitably creating product that's not great in the marketplace, and it's turning people off to it. So I think for the next couple of years, there's going to be, there needs to be a lot of consumer education around like which products are actually here for the right reasons, which ones are the best. And again, how do we build, what is a good, healthy routine for you? If you are, if you do drink alcohol, what is a healthy way to do that in your life? Like those are the things I'm most focused on. I see that being a direction that our industry takes, is just being a little bit more responsible around, teaching consumers what a healthy relationship with alcohol could look like, and then here are some other options as well. So that's sort of a high level, I think, on kind of where I think trends in growth is projected 7 to 10% year over year for the next 9 years in that industry. So I think it's going to continue to innovate and grow rapidly. So
Super helpful, Jeff. I think that's just helpful for people to also hear some of the numbers around this, right? That this isn't a niche trend. This isn't sort of going away. It's very much in this category of growth-oriented business right now, market demand, and then things like what Jen is doing to actually get people into these spaces, right? So it's happening in bars that are only NA, and it's happening in the bars that now have way more options to go into than, Jen, when you were saying, hey, 10 years ago, this is just like wasn't a thing. There were 1 to 2 options on. Jeff, would you talk about sauna water for a minute? We have a question in here and it says, Jeff and Justin, can you talk about how you conceptualized an NA sauna beverage? So many old Finns swear by beer or malt liquor in the sauna, and it's so refreshing to see a new take. And I will say, whoever asked that's an anonymous question. I know those old Finns. I grew up with a lot of those old Finns. And again, I think there is a little bit of a place sometimes to have beer around the sauna, and there's some traditions of this, of having an akavit or having a little bit of liquor afterwards as a social lubricant, maybe. And those come with a lot of the European traditions that kind of have come over. Jeff, why did we start thinking about a thing that was different than just your usual beer production tied to sauna?
Well, I fell in love with Cedar and Stone, honestly. Like, I think the brand, I had an experience there. It was really just like, I was so interested to make a product that wasn't necessarily beer with a company that I looked up to. There you go. I got one too.
Show the product. Okay, cheers.
Yeah,
NA
cheers. So yeah, I think that's where it started for me, honestly. And then it sort of like, the original inspiration was when we go to the winter camping in the Boundary Waters, we're always making like tea out of like things we can, spruce tips and dehydrated tang powder, whatever's with us. But it always reminded me of Minnesota sort of more than anything else, was that ritual. So like the flavor profile sort of comes from that experience, which also happens to be really beneficial for like post sauna rehydration. There's a lot of good stuff in sauna water, but yeah, we just decided to try it, and it sort of just, there wasn't an intent to do it again, but now it's one of our 5 core products that we make at Portage, and it's distributed regionally with plans to grow the brand even further. So a lot of that's come though. It's, you know, we made the product. It hasn't changed a whole lot. It's really just been consumers are like, where can we get this? We need more of it. Like we've never had this response to a product on the beer side of our program. And it's been really cool to see it kind of take off that way. So yeah, that's really the backstory is just love for sauna, love for brewing. What fits? You have sauna water.
We're on our 2-year anniversary, everybody, of Jeff and I helping this little product that could. And I will admit on the record on this call right now that I was like, this will be fun to do for a couple weeks in January with Jeff. And then it sold out like right away. And Jeff was like, we kind of need to make some more. I said, great, you're the brewery, keep making it. And it's been one of those big surprises, and also this really wonderful sort of creative response of let's make something that's good. And this is to toot your own horn, Jeff, of like taking some inspiration and then me being like, hey, here's some Nordic flavors to profile in here. Like we need to get some cardamom in that. And then the thing that people drink is actually multi-layered. Whereas I think, and maybe Jen, this is kind of to your point, sometimes in NA space, people just get a 1-note bubble water and it's like lemon or insert fruit. And it's like, that's all they get, when I think our palates as humans might not just be fruity and bubbles. We actually like herbs and bitterness and brininess and uniqueness and botanicals. And Jeff, you've just done such a good job on the sort of creative, really the sort of culinary side of this that I think has been so much of what's also made it a success. It's the right product at the right time, and it's good. So kudos to you and your team, Jeff, for continuing to make something that's really awesome. We love getting to serve it at our sauna spaces, and we love getting to sell it to folks who want to have it in the Duluth area around us, and ship it all over. And so thank you so much. And there's been a number of questions in there kind of around that. I think one of them that might be worth mentioning here, and I'll sort of tackle this a little bit, and then we'll come to some other ones and sort of land the plane here. Scott, you asked a really good question. You said, hey, as a business owner, could you talk about the margins around alcohol? And do you feel like your P&L can swing a community-oriented business without those margins? So, Scott, one of the things that I'm hearing underneath that is also potentially as a restaurant, or in some of these spaces where alcohol does make up a big chunk of the line items, where that does bring in a lot of revenue for some of these businesses. I would invite you to ask, what type of business is that? What are you selling? What's the core products and the core offerings? You're hearing Jeff say it's one of his top 5 products, kind of flagship products now, is an NA option. And Jeff, you've really done the research on pricing and what can the market bear and where does this product sit. You're not selling LaCroix bubble water, you're selling an elevated beverage, and so the price sort of lines with that. I would say to sauna business owners on here, you aren't creating a cafe, you aren't creating a bar. Your product is to invite people into the experience of hot and cold in whatever way you set the table for that. But that is your core offerings, are these spaces of heating up, of programming around hot and cold, potentially soaking, potentially bathhouse oriented space. And in every one of those, especially historically, if we look broader at Europe and things, the cafe and the food and the drink afterwards, I would argue, is the sort of afterthought. It's the tail end. It's the extra on top, as opposed to the core offering. The cafe, that's all they have. The business model should work for a sauna business or a public bathing space or a bathhouse with or without food. And if you can do food and if you can do drinks on top of that, it should be icing on the cake. Jeff, would you say anything else to that, kind of just in the sort of like deep dive on business and where any of these details fit?
Yeah, again, it really depends on, the business you're building and doing, I think having experience in these industries before you start a business is vital, because I've worked in brew pub settings where food literally taught me I never want to have that in my business, because it's too hard to control too many variables. So again, it just goes back to like, what's your vision? Can you deliver on that vision better than anyone else? And then can you make the business planning and the economics work? We've found a way to simplify our business model, and we rely on a lot of outside partners to facilitate things like food. So we have, delivery partnerships in town. We host a lot of events that bring in partners that host food. But again, business to business, really, things do kind of change a lot with those variables. So, but I personally would not get into the food business. It's just been my experience, at least.
So as we sort of round out our time here, I really appreciate all the questions that have come in. We might not even be able to get to every one of them for sake of time. I want to sort of also invite people to some in-person time. And so I want to do that before we lose our time here. This is a thing that we don't just talk about in digital spaces, has been evidenced here by Jen, your work around this, Jeff, by you hosting tens of thousands of people, I'm sure, in the brewery and the brew pub, in the tap room all the time. We host folks by the tens of thousands here in Duluth and in Minneapolis at our sauna locations. And so we thought, what better of a thing to do from this talk than not just to sort of celebrate dry January digitally, but to tie together all of us and to do an event. So we want to invite you to, if you're able to, and I know we have folks from all over. I see Mika Meskin in there he's in the UK right now. Mika, come back to Duluth in 6 weeks. And we are going to do a large community cold plunge event. And Jeff's going to be there featuring Sauna Water with his team. Jen's going to be there with her team, going deep dive on all these wonderful NA cocktails and talking more in depth about this. So if you guys found this conversation at all helpful and you want to get in person on this, obviously there's some places to do that, but one of those, we'd love to do that in and around the sauna with you here in Duluth in the middle of winter. And when people come to Duluth in the middle of winter, January, February, I have so much more respect for them because they're here in the most beautiful and toughest to be here months. And so we are going to cold plunge on February, Sunday, the 16th, which is a long weekend in the US, a holiday weekend. And so we'd love to have you up. Jeff and Jen, do you want to say any additional invitations to that? Anything that you want to entice people with? Jen, maybe I'll start with you on coming up to Duluth and having a fun weekend in the sauna together.
I'm fearless. I live in Minneapolis, but I'm ready to go. And I think coming up at that time of the year, I mean, we're going to all build some resilience together. And the conversations are going to be all kind of reflecting on what we talked about today. There's so many more topics to discuss. And so, yeah, I'd just like to invite everyone that can come to visit Duluth. And I've done Cedar and Stone only once, Justin, up there in Duluth. So I'm excited to come back up again.
It's changed a lot.
We can't wait to have you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then I think
Jeff,
it's got to be sauna water. I mean, that's the focus here. We're going to be bringing lots of sauna water along. So yeah, it'll be just a good time to like celebrate all the relationships that have come from sauna water in this project. Like this webinar wouldn't be happening if we didn't initially kick off that project. So yeah, it'll be great to just get us all together and then hopefully make this an annual thing. So
yeah.
We have folks joining in saying, Jessica says, happy birthday to me. Mika also says, greetings from London, February 16th will be my B-Day too. Mika, come on over. We will happily host you on your birthday if you can make it. We know that trip is a little long from London. But you guys, thank you so much for being here. And I just want to say, kind of as a recap on this, Jen, thank you for your work in actually not just thinking about these problems and these ideas, but actually making space for folks. And that is what's going to move the needle. And for you folks who are on here who are thinking about business or leaning into business and starting business, I often refer back to this quote of insight follows action. We can't think our way into these things being real. We have to really believe that it's possible to make them real in the world and figure out some of the nuance as we go and along the way. And Jen, I think you're just such a great example of finding ways to do that, finding space to do that, and now continuing to see this kind of snowball effect of, wow, people are showing up, people are here, people are wanting this more and more. And same for you, Jeff, kind of leaning in on a side of the brewing market that like most breweries over the last 2 years have not been maybe so excited about the idea of less alcohol in a beverage. And you've leaned in on that and said, hey, how do we get more of this out there? And it's become successful because of that. So thank you both for all the work that you're doing. And I would just say to anybody listening in, the NA world and the alcohol-free world is growing. The sauna market and these social spaces for wellness and connection is also growing. And if you need support on that or want support on that, our team is happy to help. Our team works with folks on online courses, on our consulting services, and specifically our Sauna Business Accelerator program, which basically takes you from vision to funding to opening your doors. So if any of those things are helpful, our team is here for that. Talk to Tom, who I think is on the call. He'd be happy to hop on a call and talk with you about integrating sauna into your community in any way. And Jeff and Jen would love to talk to you about adding beverages to those spaces that don't have alcohol in them so that people can enjoy them. That's it, you guys. Here we are at the top of the hour, landing right on time. Thank you so much, you guys, for being here. Jeff, really appreciate it and can't wait to see you in Duluth in 6 weeks. Thanks for being here, Jeff.
Sounds good.
Jen, as always, such a joy. Everybody go watch Jen's TED Talk. It's really wonderful. Let's get some more plays on the TED Talk.
Yes.
And Jen, we can't wait to see you up in Duluth in 6 weeks.
Thank you so much. What a fun conversation and needed. Yeah.
All right, you guys, until next time, we'll see you all soon. Thanks so much.